3 hidden challenges test for worthy traits, revealing 3 hidden keys to 3 magic gates. And those with the skill to survive these traits will reach the end, where the prize awaits.
Hi, I'm Johnny. This is Johnny Likes, the show where I talk about movies that I like. Today I'm talking about an adventure film that is an ode to the pop culture of the 1980s. Today, Johnny likes Ready Player One.
Tell the world.
Spoiler warning for this. You've been warned. It's 2045. The real world sucks. Surprise, surprise. But some smart game developers named Ogden Morrow and James Halliday have invented a virtual reality called the Oasis, where people can go to escape the harshness of real life. Halliday died several years ago, but he left a series of keys to be discovered in the Oasis. Once found, they will leave the ownership of the Oasis in the hands of the winner, Willy Wonka style. We follow Wade Watts, also known as Parzival, on his quest to find the keys before the evil corporation IOI can do it and commercialize the Oasis, ruining it for everyone. Parzival isn't alone, though. He's got his online friends Artemis and H with him, who is going to end up running the Oasis. This was a very pleasant surprise for me. I was not familiar with the books. All I knew going in was that it was a Steven Spielberg adventure film that had something to do with video games. I wasn't prepared for the sheer amount of member berries that this film contains. It's just Easter egg after Easter egg after Easter egg. And they easily could have called this References, the movie. And if you aren't absolutely reverent towards the pop culture of the 1980s, you are going to miss out on a huge part of what makes this film successful. It's not that it won't be enjoyable or you can't follow the story, but the fetishization of the 1980s pop culture is just so ingrained in this movie that if you didn't live through it, you will most likely have to look up many of the references contained. I lived through some of the 80s, and I'm quite familiar with a lot of the pop culture, and a bunch of the stuff still went over my head here. So things I liked in the film, I like the idea of an Easter egg hunt to get control of the biggest corporation in the world. It's a fun idea, and I like the mystery aspect of how you had to be kind of a true fan in order to solve the clues that Halliday left behind in the Oasis. It was a ton of fun watching Parzival and company follow the little breadcrumbs that Halliday has left throughout. I like the idea of the Oasis itself, an immersive world where you can go to live out your vices, or play games, or just to do stuff that you either can't or wouldn't do in the real world. I also liked that due to Halliday's influence, how the pop culture of the 70s, 80s, and 90s lived on in future generations. There were some very thrilling and spectacular scenes in this movie that I really wish I could have seen on the big screen. The opening race sequence was superb. And while watching it, I felt overstimulated, but in quite a pleasurable way. It was a very exciting scene, and I couldn't help but want to rewatch it just to catch all the little references that I missed. And that feeling of being overwhelmed or overstimulated by visual information was present pretty much throughout the whole film. But it was especially highlighted in the climactic battle scene, where very much like the race scene, it was just full of characters and vehicles and other little references to pop culture of decades past. And I pretty much had a smile on my face the whole time throughout this movie. Not just from the references, but just from how well it was executed. At this point, Spielberg, Steven Spielberg, the director, not some other random Spielberg, was on a bit of a dry run in terms of sci-fi action stuff. His dramatic stuff had been good in the meantime, but His last couple of movies, Tintin, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, and the BFG, had all been pretty underwhelming. And his last kind of good sci-fi movie was War of the Worlds, and that had been 13 years before. So I was kind of a little bit worried that he had lost his touch with this kind of stuff. And while watching this, my faith was basically restored that he had not. Like, there's a moment later on in the film where Artemis is sneaking around Sorrento's office. And it reminded me very much of the scene in Jurassic Park where the raptors are chasing the kids around the kitchen and they're just evading them. It just gave me that classic adventure feel, and it just felt very Spielberg-y to me. Sheridan was quite good as Parzival. He was very believable as a normal kind of dorky young guy who gets nervous around girls, loves video games and movies, and is obsessed with Halliday. He was relatable and likable as the guy who gets famous really quick and is just trying to do the right thing. Olivia Cooke was also relatable and likable as Artemis, the young woman who relishes the anonymity of the Oasis due to a large birthmark on her face. She can cover it up using her avatar. She can be anonymous on the web, but in the Oasis. And she's also just as much into video games and Halliday lore as Parzival is. Lena Waithe as H was great as the comic relief and Parzival's best friend, who also uses the anonymity of the Oasis to her advantage. She presents as a large black battle male type character in the Oasis. Ben Mendelsohn was fun to hate as the corporate-minded CEO of IOI, Nolan Sorrento. He played the type of guy where you couldn't hit him just once. And Mark Rylance was absolutely great as Halliday. I'd never seen him in anything before, and I instantly became a fan. And anytime I see him in anything now, I'm super excited, because I think he's a great, underutilized actor. He just seems so effortlessly good.
Maybe we should stop talking about it and start showing it. If you all want to reach under your seats, you'll find that there's nothing there. But we're gonna bring you on now.
The special effects in this were spectacular. The Oasis is brought to life in absolutely stunning fashion. It looks like a very well rendered video game. Like, it's not photorealistic, but it's not supposed to be. And above all else, it just looks fantastic. And the sequence where the kind of gang enters into the movie The Shining is a technical marvel. I couldn't tell 100% how they did it, like how they pulled off some of this stuff. It was like a very well executed magic trick. And once again, the opening race sequence and the climactic battle were just showcases of special effects, and were just a pleasure to look at. Now, for the not-so-great stuff about the movie. My biggest problem with the movie was actually just the search for the keys. I did not buy that it would have been still going on 5 years later. I think in reality, contests of this sort of scale would have been going on for a week, maybe 2 tops. Absolute tops. Why do I think this? Because gamers are absolutely notorious for finding flaws and hacks and inconsistencies in video games and video game worlds. The simplicity of just going backwards for a race would have been solved within like an hour, possibly maybe like 5 minutes on a contest of this scale. The other stuff was a bit more Halliday-centric, so I kind of believe that it would have taken a little bit longer. But still, it would have maxed out at like 2 weeks, just from like brute force attempts. There was also some stuff that was just a little bit too convenient for my liking. I was able to look over it because I was kind of having fun, but thinking about it later, it's like, yeah, that was pretty easy. Examples would be Artemis's escape from the IOI slave labor pod.
Okay, there should be 2 release handles, 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Can you feel them?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, pull it towards you. Okay, inside the panel, there's a lever. Grab it with your right hand and slide it to the left. That should release you.
Again, way too easy, and someone would have figured it out within probably a day. Another being that Artemis is in such close proximity to Parzival in real life. Like, that's possible, but it just seemed a little bit too convenient for me. The inconsistency of how people used the VR gear to interact with the Oasis. Sometimes they were in like full gear with like track pads and they're suspended by wires. Other times they just looked like they were wearing goggles and they could be sitting there or just standing there pretending to swing a sword. It made for good visuals and a quick way to get a point across, but I found it lazy enough to be just a little bit distracting. Another point that bugged me is that in the novel, H was clearly a lesbian. It was stated multiple times. It was very clear. There was no ambiguity. Whereas in the film, it's kind of hinted at, but it's never explicitly stated. And I thought this was a poor choice, and just a little bit cowardly on the part of the filmmakers, actually. Another thing was that there was a huge culture gap evident. In this world, it seemed as if nothing culturally relevant happened after the year 2000. And the last thing I'll mention was that Sorrento's password just being taped to his kind of VR pod. No, that's just way too easy. So I read the novels after I saw the movie, and one of the big differences was that there was more kind of hints and challenges that were completed in the book compared to the movie. And I understand why they changed them, as they were very video game centric. Like, they were mostly just watching somebody play a video game very well. And that's not all that entertaining or visually stimulating. Twitch fans may disagree with me here, but for the wider general audience, yeah, watching video games get played by someone else, not all that much fun. The one thing I wish they would have included from the book as just another challenge was having to play a section of Rush's 2112 on guitar. That would have been fun to watch for me. I get why they didn't do it. It might have made the movie seem a little bit too long and it might have lagged a little bit. Still, would have been nice to have another little challenge or two. One aspect of the film I found interesting was that Parzival could have really cared less about the real world. Like, at the end of the movie, they focus on how they improved the fantasy world of the Oasis and made it more accessible to everyone.
Our second move was to ban any loyalty centers from accessing the Oasis. IOI had no choice. They shut them all down. The third thing we did wasn't as popular. We closed the Oasis on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
But these people were now kind of some of the richest people in the whole world. And they had no plans to even try and throw some of that wealth at some of the big societal problems. Which I guess is typical billionaire behavior if you look at the real world, but still, I would have liked to see them try a little bit harder. As when we see real world Artemis revealed, she is supposed to be part of some sort of underground social movement.
Welcome to the rebellion, Waithe.
And that point is totally glossed over and never brought up again. But at least she seemed to have some sort of interest in caring about the real world. Now, this aspect wasn't necessarily really a problem, as the movie wasn't about how to fix the world. It was about the power of video games and movies and just media in general, and how they can really change people's lives. But I still thought this lack of interest in the real world was a little bit interesting. One other thing that was of mild interest was the lack of Spielberg references. Now, I get that if he included them, it could have seemed like a little self-referential and maybe patting yourself on the back. But you're Steven Spielberg. You have to know that you're one of the most influential directors of all time. And you had a major influence on pop culture. As it was, the kind of biggest thing that I noticed was that Parzival drives a DeLorean. Now, Spielberg produced the Back to the Future movies. He didn't even direct them. But it would have been nice to have like a little nod to like Indiana Jones or E.T. or Jaws or Jurassic Park. Like, these are all huge cultural milestones, and they just got kind of glossed over. And I think that they could have been included a little bit more without seeming too high on oneself. So I really enjoyed the movie, and my kind of pet peeves were vastly outweighed by the stuff that I did enjoy in the movie. And I liked it so much that I did pick up the books afterwards. And I would recommend them, by the way, as they arrive at the same destination, but they take a much different path. And I find that I throw this movie on a couple times a year, just when I can't really decide on something to watch, or if I just need kind of some background noise. It's also fun to see how many new references that I can catch on a given viewing. So I'm going to rate this a 4 out of 5. It had some marvelous special effects. I really liked the story. It's got good performances, and it's just overall a good time. However, the heavy reliance on nostalgia, the unrealistic aspect of the puzzle not being solved for years, and the amount of conveniences that made the narrative just a little bit too clean did drag the film down just a little bit for me. I would check out some of the stuff that's referenced in the movie and the book. Check out The Shining. It played a huge part in this movie, and when I first watched it, it made me watch The Shining again. Check out War Games. That was a huge part of the book and was completely absent from the movie, but War Games is great. And check out The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. You can see where Parsifal gets his wardrobe inspiration from in the dancing scene. So what did you guys think of this movie? And what do you want to see me talk about next? If you could do me a favor and like and subscribe, and even share this via other social media, that would just be like the bee's knees. It's quick, easy, and relatively painless. Plus, it really helps me out. Thanks for watching me talk about movies for a little while, and you can tune in next time to see what else Johnny likes.
No, 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 no!